Leaf reading from the Jade Tree. Natural disasters can strike anywhere and any time, and the damage and pain they inflict defies reason. It's for this reason that some of my students were puzzled when a magnitude 7 earthquake struck Yushu in 2010. Yushu, which means jade tree in Chinese, is a remote county in the ethnic Tibetan region of northwest China's Qinghai province, formerly known as the Kokonor region. My students not only wondered why natural disasters happen so often, but also questioned why they occur even in places where the Buddhist faith and supposedly its blessings prevail. Unable to comprehend the fact that impermanence remains inexorable even through Buddhist practice, they hoped to find answers from me. I felt the questions raised by my students largely reflected their lack of understanding of impermanence, a pervasive feature of all phenomena. To address these questions, it's necessary to start with impermanence, what it is, and how we should understand it. Meanwhile, it would be helpful to look even deeper into the causes of natural disasters and determine how we can help when they happen, and more importantly, what we should do in everyday life. Impermanence. Disasters often strike suddenly, and we are usually caught off guard. Having heard about the teaching on impermanence, we know that everything is changing, and both the gain and loss of life are unavoidable. But still, we find it hard to accept the truth of impermanence when it is revealed in such a fierce way. Impermanence often seems harsh because we only notice it when we suffer from severe pain, separation, or death. The Buddha taught that all things that arise dependently are impermanent. We can understand this truth intellectually, but when it comes to our daily experiences, we continue perceiving impermanence as unwanted or unexpected situations and events that cause frustration and agony. After all, we are not humble enough, reluctant to drop our pride and prejudice, and fully accept impermanence. If we regard some kinds of impermanence as advantageous, friendly, and acceptable, while others not, we fail to grasp the meaning of the Buddha's teachings on impermanence. If we expect certain people, things, and phenomena to stay more constant, we also fail to understand the Buddha's teachings. After the Yushu earthquake, some students asked me why the earthquake happened in an area where there are so many monasteries and almost everyone is Buddhist. Many of them thought, out of pure devotion, that all things related to Buddhism should be able to escape impermanence by some magic power. Apparently, people still prefer to believe in the existence of permanence. They expect that the people, things, and conditions they are fond of and familiar with will always remain satisfactory. Nonetheless, the Buddha wants us to understand that all things arising from causes and conditions are like a dream, a phantom, a dewdrop, a flash of lightning. None of them lasts. Even the Buddha himself became sick, grew old, and entered nirvana. Ancient India's Nalanda monastery was once a glorious centre of Buddhist learning, attracting a large number of scholars in its heyday. Destroyed in the 12th century, it is now a desolate place where only ruins remain. Likewise, the 3-story main temple of Samye Monastery, the first Buddhist monastery built in Tibet and consecrated by the great Indian Tantric Buddhist adept Padmasambhava, was destroyed overnight by a raging fire. Moreover, the splendid reliquaries built by King Ashoka in India more than 2,000 years ago have now all disappeared without the faintest trace. Even the 84,000 methods of Buddha Dharma, together with numerous scriptures, will sink into oblivion one after another. The sublime teachings and their inconceivable blessings, which have benefited countless beings and guided them on the path to liberation, will be submerged in the flowing river of time. Therefore, blessings from the 3 jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, are not meant to fortify our ego and reinforce our delusions about security. Nor do they serve as impenetrable armour to shield us from unwanted circumstances. If we think they do, we can only become more vulnerable in a world so fickle and unpredictable. The blessing power of the 3 jewels, in fact, concerns our mental transformation. Once we take refuge in the 3 jewels, their blessings are manifested in our increased kindness and wisdom, and in any further cultivation of bodhicitta and insight into emptiness. Nothing is more effective than bodhicitta and the view of emptiness to foster an open and resilient mind. Some people observed that the Tibetans affected by the Yushu earthquake reacted in an unusual way. Ruins on the streets reminded people of the earthquake that had just happened, but an unusual sense of calmness permeated the town in the aftermath. People did not wail or shout. Instead, they worked hard to rescue and help each other. Young boys managed to get their grandmothers out of the debris by digging through the rubble with their bare hands. Men who just lost their families and houses walked a long way to help friends. Some would not talk about the loss of their relatives, but every night, before going to bed, they lay in their tents and silently recited scriptures. Each person grieved differently, and sorrow was quietly transformed by a pure wish to do what was possible to help the living and to benefit the rebirth of the dead. Most families lost their kin and belongings. Some even became penniless. Still, they were sanguine about the future. As long as others are getting better, we will too. Nurtured by Buddhism, many Tibetans on the plateau take impermanence as a fact of life. They do not expect that things should evolve as they wish. Those who are born will die. Those who meet will part. Such is life. Whether they suffer from disasters or enjoy prosperity, behave with strength or weakness, refuse or accept the facts of human existence, life flows on inexorably. The Buddha told a famous story about impermanence. The story of Kisa Gotami, a woman who was devastated after losing her only child. In her grief, she asked if anyone knew of a medicine that could bring her son back to life, but to no avail. Finally, she went to the Buddha for help. The Buddha said to her, Yes, I can indeed help. But in order to prepare the medicine, you must first bring me some mustard seeds. These seeds have to be from a family that has not experienced a death within it. With high hopes, Gautami went away. She went from house to house, but to her disappointment, she could not find a single house where no one had died. Eventually, the realization struck her that she was not the only one who suffered in this way. After she returned, the Buddha preached to her compassionately. You thought you were the only one who suffered. The truth is that all things are impermanent. There is not a single day when we do not live with impermanence and confront death and suffering, and I am not sure what sort of death and suffering can be called gentle. People often approach me for advice and consolation whenever their friends, relatives, or they themselves experience anguish in life. Almost every day I hear bad news of this sort. This allows me to gain insight into the suffering and impermanent nature of life. It also makes me realize the pressing need for spiritual practice. At death, most people feel helpless and fearful regardless of how they are dying. Until then, their knowledge, skills, and intellectual capability are employed for mundane concerns, and they hardly ponder what death really means and how they should deal with it. Even if one does not encounter any serious misfortunes, life is still fleeting, and the passage of decades is like the twinkling of an eye. When days sail too smoothly, it's easy for one to overlook aging and perhaps even death. Not only the young, but also the old tend to have the false impression that life will go on indefinitely. I met Lama Regya of Tashi Monastery a few years ago. Although he was more than 80 years old, he still took his Dharma practice too causally. So I urged him to spend more time on practice because of the imminence of death. To my surprise, he died the same autumn. I trust that, given his lifelong Buddhist training, he could handle most circumstances in life calmly. But death is such a dramatic change that it induces strong fear and agony. I wondered how he faced it without sufficient preparation. One particular issue of utmost importance for Tibetans is how to navigate the dying process peacefully without going astray in the intermediate state between death and rebirth. Only accomplished practitioners can face living and dying at ease and have control over their rebirth after death. Ordinary people tend to be engulfed by extreme agony at the moment of death, completely forgetting their usual practice. Unable to recognize various appearances in the intermediate state, they miss the precious chance for spiritual liberation. If at this crucial moment someone is at the side of a dying person, consoling and guiding him to overcome fear and to recognize the clear light of the mind or the pure realms of the Buddhas, they will be liberated. It is for this reason that all burial methods, including sky burial and cremation, come with special transference rituals and funeral arrangements in Tibet. Tibetans will have these transference rituals performed for their deceased relatives so that they can go through the critical intermediate states without obstacles. For Buddhists, to help their dear ones to gain liberation is the most meaningful thing they can do for them. This was no exception for the Tibetan survivors from the Yushu earthquake. Rather than being overwhelmed by sorrow or concern regarding their own future, their priority was to find the corpses of the dead and to bring about favourable rebirth. Unlike the living, who still have the chance to prepare themselves for the final moment, if the dead missed the chance in the intermediate state after death, they would once again wander in samsaric existence. Big or small, changes are numerous in this fleeting life. We painfully face every death of our loved ones and ultimately our own death. If we can keep the Buddha's teaching in mind and put them into practice, life may become easier for us.